One moment changed everything. Sophie Cunningham was ejected, fined, and criticized after delivering one of the most controversial fouls of the WNBA season while defending Caitlin Clark. Take down that first arm. And look at Sophie cutting at Bonner. Yeah, I mean that's. But instead of hurting her career, the incident made her one of the league's fastest rising personalities. Millions watched the clip. Hundreds of thousands followed her online. Major brands came calling, and every new fine only seemed to make her even more popular. Did the WNBA accidentally create its newest star? In today's video, we'll break down the controversial hit, the viral explosion, the repeated fines, and how one unforgettable night turned into a multi-million-dollar success story. The hit heard around the WNBA. The night started as a routine road win. Indiana beat Connecticut 88-71 at Gainbridge Fieldhouse on June 17, 2025. Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever survived the drama to beat Connecticut 88-77 to advance to the Commissioner's Cup championship game. The kind of result that barely makes a highlight reel on its own. But somewhere in the middle of that game, the referees let something slide that would define the entire season for one Indiana role player, and the fallout would end up dwarfing anything that happened on the scoreboard. Sophie Cunningham had already built a reputation before this particular night. The kind of veteran presence teams had specifically for moments like this one. She had signed with Indiana that off-season after several seasons with Phoenix. Taking on a role that went beyond her statistics, a physical, vocal presence alongside a franchise player who had absorbed more contact than any rookie in league history the year before. Nobody around the Fever organization was surprised when she eventually stepped into that role fully. The only surprise was how quickly the moment would arrive. In the third quarter, Sun guard J.C. Sheldon poked Caitlin Clark in the eye during a shoving match. This escalated, so that was called a flagrant. Those two were technicals. Charles got a technical and then Mabry for what we thought should have been two technicals and ejection. No technical, no flagrant, nothing. Moments later, Connecticut's Marina Mabry shoved Clark hard to the floor. Clark and Sun veteran Tina Charles were both hit with technical fouls. Sheldon's foul eventually got upgraded to a flagrant. Mabry, the player who had actually knocked Clark down, was not ejected at all. Was the league really going to let that stand without any real consequence? Sophie Cunningham did not think so. With less than a minute remaining and the outcome no longer in doubt, she caught Sheldon driving to the basket, wrapped her up around the neck, and pulled her straight to the ground. It sparked a full scrum between both teams. And when the whistles finally stopped, Cunningham had been given a flagrant 2 and ejected. And here's we got another break here as J.C. Sheldon goes right after Circuit Cunningham. Sheldon and Sun guard Lindsay Allen were tossed as well. The league reviewed the play and fined Cunningham $400. On paper, it looked like a routine punishment for a routine on-court incident. The kind of fine that gets a line in a transaction report, and nothing more. League officials treat these situations as procedural, a box to check after any ejection, rarely expecting the fine itself to become a story. Nobody in the league office could have predicted what was about to happen next. Cunningham, for her part, did not treat the moment as controversial at all. She posted a lighthearted photo to her Instagram stories afterward, embracing the chaos rather than distancing herself from it. Fans immediately picked up on her willingness to own the moment publicly, and that willingness became just as important to what happened next as the foul itself. Was this really the first time Cunningham and Sheldon had crossed paths physically that season? It was not. The two had already been involved in a collision earlier in the year that left Cunningham with a chipped tooth, a detail that only added texture to the growing rivalry once the June ejection made headlines. None of that history made the retaliation any more or less deserved on its own, but it gave fans an easy narrative to latch onto. A physical rivalry that had been building for months, finally boiling over in front of a national audience. Broadcasters covering the game in real time seemed almost as surprised as the players themselves. Commentary in the moment focused heavily on whether Cunningham had crossed the line, with immediate debate over whether her response matched the severity of what had happened to Clark 2 quarters earlier. That debate playing out live on national television only added fuel to a story that was already spreading well beyond the arena before the final horn even sounded. The viral moment that changed Sophie. Could a single retaliation foul really change the trajectory of an entire career? Within 24 hours, the clip of Cunningham dragging Sheldon to the floor had spread across every corner of the internet, and her social media numbers were exploding in real time. She gained more than 500,000 new followers across TikTok and Instagram in a single day, a growth rate most athletes never see across an entire career. Her TikTok account alone told the story in numbers nobody could argue with. Sophie Cunningham. She's now at 850,000 followers. She had roughly 300,000 followers before the incident. Within weeks, that number had crossed 1 million. Sportico, one of the most respected outlets covering sports business, ran the numbers and reported that the moment had generated an unprecedented $1 million boost to her personal value in just 3 days. A figure the outlet noted made her $400 fine look almost comically small by comparison. How often does a single defensive play generate this kind of financial windfall for a role player? Almost never. And that rarity was exactly what made the story spread so far beyond typical basketball circles. Sports business writers who rarely covered the WNBA suddenly found themselves writing about a player averaging modest scoring numbers off the bench purely because the math behind her sudden popularity was too striking to ignore. Analysts began citing her as a case study in what modern sports economists call proximity value, the financial benefit an athlete captures simply by standing close to the sport's biggest star at exactly the right moment. Why does the internet fall in love with a protector so quickly? Something about the moment resonated far beyond typical basketball fans. Cunningham had not been chasing a highlight or a statistic. She had been defending her teammate against a league that in the eyes of millions of new fans had failed to protect its most important player all season long. The internet had a name for her within days. The Enforcer. A nickname that stuck immediately and never really let go. Brands moved just as fast as the fans did. Cunningham signed a partnership with Ring almost immediately after the incident. Caitlin's teammate in Indiana, Sophie Cunningham. She's making headlines after she was called on to be a ring girl at UFC 329. Timing that felt almost too perfect to be coincidental. Her existing relationships with Quest Nutrition and Adidas took on new visibility overnight, and she picked up a recurring analyst role on Phoenix Suns broadcasts, adding a media career on top of an already growing basketball one. How rare is it for a role player in her 7th professional season to suddenly become the most talked about story in her sport? Historically, almost unheard of. Most athletes build their brand gradually across years of consistent production, incremental follower growth, and carefully managed public appearances. Cunningham compressed that entire process into a single week, and industry observers who track athlete marketability struggled to find a comparable case anywhere in recent WNBA history. Was this attention going to fade the way most viral sports moments eventually do? Everyone assumed it would. Viral sports clips typically have a shelf life measured in days, not months. What nobody accounted for was that Cunningham had no intention of going quiet once the algorithm moved on to the next story. If anything, the attention seemed to embolden her further, and the next chapter of her season would prove exactly that. She was just getting started. Teammates and coaches around the Fever organization noticed the shift almost immediately. Cunningham's role on the roster had always been valued internally, but the external perception changed overnight, turning a dependable veteran into a genuine drawing card in her own right. Opposing teams took notice, too, and coaching staffs across the league began preparing specifically for the physical, vocal presence she brought every time Indiana took the floor. Every fine backfired. Did the WNBA actually think a $500 fine would change anything about who Sophie Cunningham was? On July 18, 2025, she posted a TikTok lip-syncing the lyrics. "Stupid or is it slow?" aimed squarely at the league's officiating. The league fined her $500 for the post. If the goal was to make her more careful about what she said publicly, it did not work even a little. The reaction online followed a pattern that was already becoming familiar. Clips of the TikTok spread faster than the fine itself did, and fans who had never watched a full WNBA broadcast found themselves debating officiating standards purely because of a 15-second video. Every fine seemed to function less like a punishment and more like a promotional trigger, pushing Cunningham's name back into headlines just as the previous news cycle started to fade. 10 days later, she launched her own podcast. Show Me Something. Produced with The Volume, debuted on July 28th. And Cunningham used the platform exactly the way anyone who had watched her all season should have expected. She called WNBA officiating just so inconsistent, adding, "If I was a ref, I know I would mess up all the time. Like, I'm not saying that your job is easy, but when it is a simple call in front of your face multiple times, what are you doing? What are you doing?" The league fined her again. "If I was a ref, I know I would mess up all the time. Like, I'm not saying that your job is easy, but when it is a simple call right in front of your face multiple times, What are you doing? $1,500 this time for comments made on her own podcast. She found out about it in the most unglamorous way possible, pulled aside by Fever general manager Amber Cox, and told the league had been in touch. Rather than backing down, she addressed the pattern head-on during that same debut episode. "You fining me $500 is not going to do," she said. "And then I'll get fined for that, and then I'll get fined for this, and the fines will continue. You fining me $500 is not going to do, and then I'll get fined for that, and then I'll get fined for this, and then the fines continue." Was she bluffing or did she actually mean it? August answered that question quickly. Cunningham picked up a third fine, amount undisclosed, after commenting on the officiating in a Wings Fever matchup involving Paige Buchers. "I love Paige to death," she said on the podcast. "But those refs were giving her every freaking whistle last night." Afterward, she summed up her season in one line for reporters. "I'm officially 3 for 3 on being fined by the WNBA. They didn't like my comments on Paige Buchers. I didn't even say anything bad." By most accounts, she was laughing about it, entirely unbothered by a pattern that would have rattled most athletes navigating their first real national spotlight. How many players actually get more popular every single time the league tries to discipline them? Vanishingly few. But that appeared to be exactly what was happening with Cunningham. And both the league office and her own growing fan base seemed to sense it at the same time. Podcast download numbers climbed with every new fine. Sponsors took notice, and a pattern that should have functioned as a deterrent instead became something closer to a marketing calendar. 3 separate news cycles spaced perfectly across a single summer. Did the league ever consider changing its approach as the pattern became obvious? If it did, there was little public evidence of it. Each fine followed roughly the same process: a comment or a post, a review, a dollar figure attached, and a statement that rarely elaborated beyond the basic facts of the violation. That consistency, ironically, made Cunningham's response feel even more compelling by comparison. Where the league offered procedure, she offered personality, and audiences overwhelmingly preferred the personality. The business boom after the injury. Cunningham's on-court season ended earlier than anyone wanted. She suffered a torn MCL and missed the remainder of the 2025 campaign, finishing with 30 games played and 13 starts, averaging 8.6 points, 3.5 rebounds, 1.2 assists, and a steal per game, while shooting 46.9% from the field and 43.2% from three-point range. The Fever also won the 2025 Commissioner's Cup that season. And for the first time in franchise history, the Indiana Fever are WNBA Commissioner's Cup champions, adding a $30,000 payout to Cunningham's total earnings for the year. Could an injury actually slow down a business trajectory moving this fast? It barely made a dent. Cunningham's career off the court kept accelerating even as her season ended on the sideline. Her podcast kept growing. Her broadcast work continued, and brands kept lining up regardless of whether she was actively playing. If anything, the injury gave her more free time to build the exact media presence that had already started paying off in ways her basketball salary never could. Watching from the sidelines seemed to sharpen her voice rather than soften it. Without games to focus on, Cunningham leaned further into podcasting and media appearances, turning what could have been a lost stretch of the season into one of the most productive off-court runs any WNBA player had managed in a single year. Every appearance added another layer to a brand that had started improbably with a single hard foul in June. Then in November 2025 came the deal that changed everything. Cunningham signed with Project B, a brand new 5-on-5 women's basketball league. Project B, it's a league. So the W season goes from May to October for people who don't know. Planning to tour Asia and Europe beginning in late 2026. Her contract, $2 million, reportedly including an equity stake in the league itself rather than a simple playing salary. It was a structure typically reserved for athletes with far more traditional star power, and it landed for a player who 1 year earlier had been a role player fighting for minutes on a rebuilding roster. How does a $2 million equity deal even compare to a $400 fine from a single night in June? The math is almost absurd when placed side by side. Across 7 professional WNBA seasons, Cunningham's total base salary earnings added up to roughly $637,780. The Project B contract alone represented more than 3 times that entire career total. Signed in a single afternoon on the strength of a brand the league's own fines had helped build. Few athletes in any sport have ever watched a single controversial play translate so directly into a life-changing business opportunity within the span of a single calendar year. The momentum did not stop with Project B. 2026 brought a contributor role with USA Network's WNBA coverage and a feature in the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. Two opportunities that rarely find their way to role players averaging under 10 points a game. By the time industry analysts started estimating her net worth for 2026, the figure landed somewhere between $2 million and $3 million, built almost entirely on endorsements, media work, and a single equity contract that traced its roots directly back to one retaliation foul in Indianapolis. Sports business analysts who study athlete valuation began referencing Cunningham's case specifically when explaining how quickly modern sports economics can shift. A single viral moment properly leveraged could now outweigh years of traditional on-court production in terms of pure financial impact. Few case studies illustrated the point as cleanly as Cunningham's did, and her name started appearing in sports business coverage far removed from typical basketball reporting. What made her particularly valuable to Project B specifically, beyond the obvious social media numbers? League executives building a brand new international product needed a personality capable of generating attention without relying entirely on traditional star power, and Cunningham fit that description perfectly. She had already proven across an entire summer of finds and viral moments that she could command a national conversation without averaging 20 points a night. For a startup league trying to build an audience quickly, that kind of proven attention-generating ability was worth paying for directly. The WNBA's biggest miscalculation. What was the WNBA actually trying to accomplish with 3 separate finds in a single season? Presumably, a quieter, more careful Sophie Cunningham. Instead, the league got the opposite outcome at every single turn. Each find generated headlines. Each headline generated new followers, new brand interest, and new proof that authenticity, even when it costs a few $100s at a time, resonates louder than almost anything a league's marketing department could script on its own. Compare Cunningham's trajectory to a typical league-approved promotional campaign, and the contrast becomes even clearer. Marketing departments spend enormous budgets trying to manufacture exactly the kind of authentic, relatable personality Cunningham built for free simply by refusing to filter her honest reactions to what she saw on the floor. No amount of scripted content could have generated the same organic reach as one athlete genuinely defending her teammate, and then genuinely refusing to apologize for saying what she thought about the officiating that followed. Cunningham herself seemed to understand the dynamic better than anyone in the league office. She never treated the fines as a threat worth backing down from, and by the time the 2026 season approached, she was openly joking about the entire saga on her own podcast. Discussing the league's officiating meetings ahead of the new year, she said, "New year, fresh start. And we've had meetings with the refs and I think that they have owned up for last year truly. Wait, does that mean I get my money back? Like if they're starting to agree with what I saw the entire time, should I be able to get my money back? Does a league ever really win when its punishment becomes a player's origin story?" It is hard to argue the WNBA came out ahead in this particular exchange. Every dollar in fines Cunningham paid over the course of the season amounted to a rounding error next to the value those same controversies generated for her personally. The league wanted compliance. What it created instead was one of the most recognizable personalities in the sport. A podcast host, a broadcaster, and now an equity partner in a league built to compete with the very organization that kept trying to fine her into silence. Fans watching the entire saga unfold in real time seemed to understand exactly what was happening before most media outlets fully caught on. Social media comment sections filled with the same joke over and over. Fine her again. Make her richer again. A running bit that captured the absurdity of the entire situation better than any formal analysis could. The fans, in a sense, understood the economics of the moment faster than the institutions trying to manage it. Cunningham's rise says as much about the modern sports landscape as it does about her individually. Authenticity travels faster than any press release, and audiences increasingly reward athletes willing to say what they actually think, fines or no fines. The WNBA spent a combined sum that barely registers against a single sponsorship deal trying to manage her voice. In the end, all it managed to do was amplify it, turning a role player into one of the most bankable personalities to come out of the league in years. Could other players around the league learn something from watching how this entire saga unfolded? Almost certainly. Cunningham's story offers a genuine blueprint for athletes navigating a sports landscape where authenticity increasingly outperforms caution. She never once apologized for a single comment that drew a fine, never softened her public persona to appease league officials, and consistently framed every fine as simply the cost of speaking honestly about what she saw on the floor. That refusal to be managed, more than any single foul or podcast episode, is what turned $400 into a business worth millions. What started as a controversial foul ended up becoming one of the most unexpected success stories in modern women's basketball. Every fine, every headline, and every debate only made Sophie Cunningham's voice louder, proving that in today's sports world, authenticity can be more valuable than silence. Whether you agree with her actions or not, there's no denying that one moment reshaped her career and changed how athletes build their brands. The biggest question now is what comes next for Cunningham and for the WNBA itself. Did the league accidentally create one of its most marketable personalities? Let us know your thoughts and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more sports stories from Hoops Uncovered.